Welcome to the Marketing Tech section. This is where Pascal and I choose sometimes one, sometimes two items of marketing tech and tell you why we like it and what it does. So Pascal, what have you got for me this week?
Roger, do you remember I mentioned a moment ago Trello.com, which is a great visual platform to manage action lists, to share information with your team and so on. Now, sometimes Trello can be a little complex or can demand quite a bit of time and perseverance. So there is a simpler interface I wanted to mention, remind you of, called Google Keep. Now, Google Keep is almost the best kept secret by Google. And yes, I did say that on purpose. So it was introduced without any announcements or any fanfare, which is usually the case with Google, quite some time ago. And this is essentially a visual dashboard where you can create post-it stickers, you can do to-do lists, you can even leave voice messages and all sorts to essentially help you manage a project. Unlike a Trello, you're not allowed more than one board, so you have to think about this. But think of it as your kind of cork board, and you can pin things on it. And with each of the post-it notes, you can then go into more details. You can add some list. You can then tick things off the list, and so on and so forth. But in spirit, it's meant to be for kind of team collaboration, but it can be used, for yourself on your own. One of the really impressive feature of Google Keep is that it will transcribe audio for you, which is actually quite nice. So if you were to use the mobile app and leave yourself or your team a small message, it can also be transcribed and become copy, which is actually quite interesting. What you can also do with Google Keep, let's say you're working on a visual, let's say you're going to be working on an advert or maybe on a PDF document or on the cover of a book. What people can leave is annotation on Google Keep, which is actually quite nice. Not many platforms can do that. The one thing that I've not had the pleasure of trying just yet is reminders based on location. So here's the thing, Roger. You have some actions against a particular project, the to-do list, and you say to yourself, right, I need to buy maybe some items, or I need to book something, and you will be buying this item from a specific shop, or you would be booking tickets from a specific venue. If, as you travel, you are near the venue, you get a reminder that on your action list, you meant to be buying something from that particular business. And I thought it was kind of interesting how Google Maps decided to kind of weave its way into other aspects of the Google products, because as you know, the plan for Google is to make Google Maps a social network, although they seem to be taking a long time to do so. So again, as part of your kind of mastering your goals, maybe using the Ulysses Pact, if you allow me to make a link, Google Keep, a very simple interface, but very powerful features.
And I think we've mentioned Canva before in Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast. Can't remember whether it was a specific shout out like this or whether we've just mentioned it from time to time. Now, I've been using Canva off and on for, it must be 5 or 6 years, mainly for my other podcasts' graphics. But recently, I've been taking much more of an interest in things for YouTube, and I made a shout out a few weeks ago for something called MixKit, which gives you a load of graphics that you can use on YouTube. Now, recently, Canva have introduced a lot more video-based content and templates, whereas previously it was mainly just static visuals that you could use for PowerPoint slides or social media. So effectively just photographs or collages and that sort of thing. They've introduced some really good, usable, changeable YouTube templates. Now, anybody who watches the video version of Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast can't have failed to be absolutely blown away by the introductory graphics that we have on the show. And it's really bright and it's really 1980s. But that was produced using an After Effects template, an Adobe After Effects template. But now, within Canva, you can create the same sort of thing, but without the price tag that goes with an After Effects template. And whilst they're not quite as flexible and jazzy as our own introduction, Pascal. There's a lot of stuff in there, and you could create little title sequences between the segments if you're doing a show like ours, or just a quick introduction to your YouTube channel without having to go away and create it using a very expensive product like Adobe After Effects. So I was actually quite impressed having a play with it this week as to what you can do and the flexibility and the animations that you can create right there in Canva. So Canva's no longer static, it's now video enabled, so go and check it out.
That is incredible news, Roger. I mean, Canva's become the ultimate virtual assistant. And if you work alongside a graphic designer, as you and I do, then really it's just really quite impressive what you can achieve.
Yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of people slate Canva a bit. You can tell when somebody's using Canva. But again, you don't want to look the same as everybody else. But if you take one of their templates, the good thing is it saves you time, saves you a bit of money, but make sure you tweak it so that you put your own stamp on it so that it doesn't look exactly the same as it might do on somebody else's, but make it your own. And honestly, there's a lot of really good stuff in there.
So, Roger, what have you brought from your toolkit or memory bank?
Okay, Pascal, I've got an admission. I like to have something to keep me on track, like a to-do list, but I am an absolute nightmare when it comes to using to-do lists. So I sort of pop in and out of using things like to-do list apps and to-do list platforms. And I'm going through one of those phases at the moment where I think as business picks up after COVID, as the lockdown eases, more inquiries are coming through, and I suddenly found myself dropping the ball a bit. So I've gone back to looking at these sort of to-do list productivity type apps. And I thought I would highlight two of them for you today. First one is one that I've been using on and off for probably about 5 or 6 years, and it's called Todoist. Now that's all one word, Todoist. And it's probably, to use your analogy, it's probably the 3-star Michelin version of the to-do list app. Not only can you create the tasks that you've got to do and put deadlines on them and synchronize them with calendars and all of that sort of thing, you can also integrate them with your team, you can integrate them with your business. But what I actually really like about Todoist is that you can create tasks aligned to goals. Now, it's it's another of my marketing bugbears that quite a lot of us as marketers tend not to have goals, and goals are very important as part of overall strategy. I mean, my philosophy, marketing isn't just about communications, it's also about creating an offer, having a series of goals, and then building your marketing communications activity around it. And what I do like about Todoist is the ability to align the tasks that you are performing with specific goals. And those goals can be, it can be anything. It can just be a project goal, it could be a revenue goal, number of customers, whatever it might be. But if you are goal orientated, then Todoist is a great app for you from a to-do list point of view. But then I found on my phone, do you know how sometimes when you go into your phone and it tells you you've got a number of updates for apps, and sometimes you can go in after a few days and find that about 35 of your apps need updating. Well, I used to use something which was called Wunderlist. Wonder spelt with a U, Wunderlist. And what I liked about Wunderlist was that it was almost like the complete opposite of Todoist. It was literally just a to-do list, and you could set it to synchronize with your diary and priorities, and that's pretty much it. And when I was updating the phone, it told me that Wunderlist has been taken over by Microsoft, and they've renamed it. It's just called Microsoft To Do, and effectively it's the same as Wunderlist. They've just put a Microsoft sort of banner and logo and color scheme all over it, branding, and it's remarkably simple. As I say, it doesn't have all of that extra functionality and all of that sort of thing, and it did get me thinking. I love the simplicity of Wunderlist Oblique Microsoft To Do. And I think probably at the stage I'm at the moment, as business starts to pick up, I'm probably going to veer towards the simpler one rather than the one with more functionality. Because actually, all I need is something to just keep me on track and to give me a nudge from time to time when a deadline is approaching. I probably don't need all of that extra functionality. But I thought I'd tell you about both of those because undoubtedly, in the same way as we were talking about SEO, some people will want the 3-star Michelin approach and others will want the cafe on the corner. And at the moment, my cafe on the corner version of To-Do List is Microsoft To Do.
Thank you very much. I didn't know about those two apps, so thanks very much for bringing them to us and to our viewers and listeners. So today, Roger, it's all about Google Maps for me.
Okay.
Now, I don't know about you, but I have no memory of how I managed life and traveling without Google Maps. It's really quite something how now, if I go anywhere, Google Maps would be my traveling companion. But Google Maps has also business facets. The most famous one, I would argue, is Google My Business, which is where you go in and fill essentially an online form to become listed and have your little red pin. But before I come on to that one, I wanted to remind you and our viewers and listeners about Google My Maps. So Google My Maps is a subset of Google Maps, which allows you, using your Google account, a free product, allows you to create some maps that then you can share on. And those really are using the same kind of visuals and same look and feel and so on, but you have your own unique pins. So now, why would you want to create maps using Google Maps and share them on? Well, there's two things. Firstly, you could use them for sales and marketing. So to give you an example, I was recently helping a customer make sense of their market, to make sense of their target audience. Now, on Google My Maps, what you can do is search for your prospects and your customers, and then a map will appear. So if you can, in this case, he was looking for electrical contractors because you had a software that could obviously help them run the business more successfully. And within moments, we had a map with pins of electrical contractors. Then you can change the pins to depending on the size of the business, depending on the location. But there's something really powerful about the visualization of where your customers are, as opposed to, forgive me, Roger, a Excel spreadsheet or any form of documentation with a long list of names and postcodes. And what was interesting is that then he had a vision that his customers would be much further away from him. He had this vision of having to think more nationwide, realizing that within a 10-mile radius, you had plenty to go after. So he also informed his business strategy. So Google My Maps could be used to inform yourselves and almost to continue as customer service after that. You could also use it for content marketing. So we now know, because you've confessed to that fact many times, that you're very fond of coffee, Roger. And so what you could do moving forward is create a map with spots your best go-to coffee shops and venues for content creation, to be to have imagination and so on. And you could share that as part of a blog post or as part of a Rog vlog blog post in terms of these are my go-to coffee shops. Now, this is obviously a fun example, but if you are, example, in the business of public speaking, you could make a map with your top recommended venues that maybe event organizers could use and share that as part of your content marketing. So there's both, if like, internal use for sales and marketing, market research. There's also external use for content marketing. Google My Maps, I highly recommend it. It's really quite powerful. Quickly about Google My Business, probably the most underrated and underused kind of marketing tool for small businesses. It's not just for shops and restaurants, Roger. It's for everybody. Even if you're working from home, you can still kind of be listed. You just have an area of activity as opposed to an address. But the plans for Google, let's be clear, Roger, is for Google Maps to become a social network. They announced this about 2 years ago, and they seem to be taking their time, probably because it's obviously quite complex. But they are putting features that leads me to think that they still want to do that. So number one, they want you to post articles and updates on your Google My Business account, which gives you, of course, that listing on Google Maps. Why they didn't call it the same, it's unfortunate. They allow you to also have one-to-one messages with your prospects and customers. People can leave reviews, as you know. You can upload photos, you can upload videos, you can answer questions as well. So there's a whole kind of preparation towards essentially this becoming a social network, but also against your business name or your name as an individual, you're guaranteed number one position. Bear in mind the conversation we had a moment ago about SEO. So I suppose my kind of request would be for people to go back to their Google My Business entry, perhaps neglected for the last few months and few years, and go through the different fields and the different features and make sure that it's fully completed. And if you are a blogger, if you are a podcaster, and if you are a YouTuber, just upload a copy of what you've done on your Google My Business account. You're not going to get a lot of traffic, but that prepares you for the habit of having an additional platform when it becomes a fully fledged social media platform.
Fantastic. Yeah, I am aware of Google My Business, and sometimes it sends you an email to remind you, doesn't it? But it's one of those things that I have neglected myself, and I admit that. So it's a timely reminder for me to get my backside in there and make sure that everything's up to date. So let's talk tech. Every week, Pascal and I look for one or two apps or gadgets or pieces of software that have caught our attention that can help us with our marketing efforts or our productivity. Pascal, hit me with what you've got this week.
So, Roger, I'm going through a bit of a Google phase, after what I mentioned last week and so on. So I just want to complete that phase and almost get it out of my system. So have you come across Google Books?
I have come across Google Books.
Right. Now, you know that I'm a very, very big fan of curation and content citation. So I wanted to kind of remind people about Google Books. Now, Google Books is a search service provided by Google where you can search, embed, and share books and quotes and passages to your audience. So this is how it works. You would select Google Books in the search services. You can either Google it or use the drop-down menu options. You put a keyword. So I was lucky imagination. I put the keyword content marketing, sorry to say, and a series of books appear. Now, what you can do, the large majority of the books have been scanned by Google themselves, and you can literally, if you choose, copy and paste the embed code and share the page or the chapter or whichever onto your blog. Write an article about the book you've read, or use the page that you're kind of sharing as a hook for your article, but essentially adding a bit more interest to maybe your blogging activities. You can, of course, share the link directly on social media and so on and so forth. So it's just a fun way to bring a bit of life maybe to I would say, your social media activities and your blogging activities. So go back to this one if you've not seen it before, because you might be very surprised by the sheer number of books that have been scanned by Google. Some of them very recent, some of them much, much older, but also how you can really specify a particular page or passage. There is a close cousin to Google Books called Google Talk to Books, and this one is more about citations. So you can't do any form of embedding and anything else that you can do with Google Books. What you can do is find a sentence, maybe a paragraph that can help you maybe bring a presentation to life, or organize some quotes type content for your social media. So again, what you can do on this one, hence why it's called Google Talk to Books, you can use your mobile phone and use voice to either mention a few words or mention a phrase you maybe remember from something that you've read, and then a whole list of citations and paragraphs would be featured together with a link to the books for you. It's just a wonderful way to sometimes discover books that you wouldn't know existed, but also if you like to kind of pepper your blogging, your articles, even your podcast video with quotes from authoritative sources, then Google Talk to Books could be a wonderful way to get to that source of information very quickly.
I like that. I like the last part about finding quotes, because I do like to put quotes in my articles and to refer to things in my podcast, but sometimes doing the research is too much. And sometimes you just want to do it very, very quickly. And this sounds to me as if it's something that I need to have a look at. So, Pascal, thank you so much for that.
No problem.
I've got a slightly different slant this week. We talk about films, don't we, on this podcast a lot. And these are really to help you with your entertainment. And the first one is an app called Just Watch. It's the Just Watch app. And a shout out to our colleague Richard Tubb for pointing this one out to us. Now, I don't know about you, Pascal, but sometimes I'll get, like the other night, I said to my wife, "Oh, do you know what I fancy watching? I fancy watching The Usual Suspects." Now, it's a great film, but it's one that we've never bought on DVD, Blu-ray, or anything. So I thought, well, I wonder, is it on Netflix? Is it on Amazon Prime? Is it on iTunes? Is it on BBC iPlayer or anything like that? And it can be quite laborious, can't it? Just trogging through Netflix, going through Amazon Prime, looking on all of the platforms, and sometimes it can take you a long time. And then when you do find it, you find out, oh, actually, it's not free. You've got to pay to either rent it at £5 an hour or buy it at $15.99 or whatever it is. This app, it's genius, absolute genius. So I open up the app, type in The Usual Suspects, and within a split second, it tells me where The Usual Suspects is available on all the different platforms like Netflix, all the different BBC iPlayer, Channel 4 player, and all of that, anywhere in the world, and if it's free and how much it costs. And as luck would have it, or as luck would not have it, as it turned out, Usual Suspects isn't available free anywhere. So I ended up renting it off iTunes for $3.49. But it was fine. We really, really enjoyed it. But when you know what you want to watch, but you don't know where it is, and you haven't got it on DVD or Blu-ray, Just App will tell you exactly where to find it, and it will save you so much time. But then, Pascal, there are some times when you just want something new, don't you? You just want something new. And one of the things I find quite frustrating about Netflix is, even though the interface is beautiful in the way that it shows you the covers of the films, and the algorithm learns what you like and it'll present you with a certain number of selections, we do know that the number of films and TV programs on Netflix, there's hundreds of thousands of them, and they're never going to present to you anything other than a very, very small snapshot of what's available. And I think that sometimes, especially if you're geeks like you and I, you sometimes miss some of the choice cuts. Now, I came across this, it's not even an app, this is just a website, and I've included the link to the website in the notes, and the website is called ogrescrypt.com. Ogre's Crypt. Now, this is a supreme work of utter geekery. This guy has literally gone in and he's listed by category and all this is a web page of thousands of links categorized into subsections. So, for example, there's a whole section on horror movies, and within horror movies, you've got B horror movies, creature features, cult horror movies, deep sea horror movies, foreign horror movies, horror comedy. You get the idea. And within each one, if you click on it, then you'll get a complete list of that series of films within the Netflix real estate. And I love this because just even clicking on one of those categories like creature horror movies, you suddenly get a load of movies that aren't presented to you by the Netflix app, but it's just a list of what's on Netflix full stop. And you can guarantee that you'll see something that catches your eye that you won't have got offered up by the algorithm. So Ogre's Crypt, if you're into Netflix and you want something to be a nice surprise, go and look at his work of astonishing geekery. It's fantastic.
Do you know what's brilliant, by the way? Thanks for that, because I definitely use, just because of the name, I'll have to check out the website and the first app, Just Chat. But you and I obviously don't talk to each other. We don't share our kind of little ideas. We want to surprise each other. But we've both, once again, gone for very similar apps and solutions in terms of curation and citation without even talking to each other, which I think is absolutely remarkable. But I think you also, in both cases, from what my choices and yours, we are kind of looking into this idea of abundance of information and content. And now hides, the solution has to be around getting to the content you need and want as fast as possible with the least amount of inconvenience as possible. And I think you're right, Netflix and Amazon Prime and all the others, they're now suffering from this abundance of content where sometimes, I would, just because I'd have the time and the aspiration, would search for things for a long time and discover some very good films that are just buried in there somewhere in their database.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.